Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Arborist Growth Partners podcast. And today I'm really excited to have Brent Hocking with me, who's a consulting arborist over in Hamilton, Ontario. Brent, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me.
No, it's awesome to be speaking to you. Before I ask who you are, what you do, where you come from, where you're going, I'm going to ask you that key question that I ask everybody, which is, in your opinion, what one or two things that tree service companies who are really succeeding do where other ones are really struggling to survive?
I mean, there's a few, depending on how you look at it, there's a few different ways to answer. Um, the first of which, if you're an arborist right now, if you're thinking about going independent, the assumption is that if you're good at the work, then you'll be good at running the business. But that's kind of very much not the case. In my own preparation to go independent, I spent an entire year preparing before I made the
Mm.
leap. I worked for a big company for many years, and it's always kind of the plan that people have in the back of their head, like, oh, I'll do this independent one day. I'll be working for myself. It's going to be great. But you have the focus that allows you to do the job well because all the other things are taken care of. But once you start running independently, you realize that there's so many facets of the business that, hey, they're not just taking care of themselves, and I have to actually be on top of this stuff. And if you're not expecting what exactly is on the back end, then it starts to pile up pretty quick. And I'm someone that, like, it makes me really anxious. Like, if I haven't looked at my QuickBooks for a few days, or if I know I have like expense receipts that are just sitting there, it kind of like paralyzes me. I'm like, I need to get this stuff into QuickBooks, but then I'll let it sit for another day, and then something will come up, and all of a sudden I'm like a week behind. And I'm sure to most people that's totally normal. There's people that I'm sure just at tax time they get all their receipts together and
I'm one
uh,
of those.
yeah, and put it all into QuickBooks or hire a bookkeeper
Yeah.
or whatever. But the business side of things is very important.
Mm.
There's a book. It's called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael
Yes.
Gerber.
Mm.
Yeah, and it introduces you to the idea that within everyone who wants to be an independent business owner, there are three different people inside of you. One is the entrepreneur, one is the manager, and one is the technician. And an arborist working in the field is the technician. It's the person that executes the work. The manager is the one that takes care of the day-to-day operations,
Mm.
scheduling, invoicing, whatever. And the entrepreneur is the visionary, the one that steers the ship, the one that is kind of figuring out where are we going to go next with this. And operating with that idea in mind is super important because you pretty quickly realize, like, just because you can do the work doesn't mean you know how to run a business. So, like, giving yourself a business education
Mm.
before you decide to launch as an independent is very important. And it's something that can kind of hit you hard when you start out. And depending on how you handle it, that's when, you'll see this brick wall in front of you of, oh, I have to solve all these problems now. Or if you've kind of given yourself a rudimentary business education, you've already taken into account all these things. And now the work is coming in and you know how to handle it, kind of where to send it within the boxes in your mind, and you can stay on top of it.
Amazing answer, and that I'm so glad you mentioned that book actually because it's come up a couple of times in different episodes as well. And if anybody hasn't read it, The Myth Revisited by Michael E. Gerber is a fantastic book to, like you said, to help you understand the difference between the person who's doing and the person that's actually running and building the business. Absolutely awesome.
Hmm.
So tell us about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? Where did you come from? What are you doing now? Where are you going?
Hmm. Uh, I'm someone that works best when there's a mountain in front of me. I guess that's the best way to put it. My formal education and training is in music. So,
Mm.
yeah, and it started from an early age
Mm.
and all throughout, elementary school, high school. Our high school had the best music program in the province at the time, so really solid foundation there. And then I went on to post-secondary education in music. It was jazz studies, and I'm a drummer, so
Oh, cool.
it was really fun. And I also got into the recording, mixing, live sound reinforcement, things like that. And that was kind of my world. So it's interesting because it's another kind of highly technical world that you have to learn, and everyone has their own ways of doing things, and you can obsess about gear and stuff like that.
Right.
But of course, in that world, you kind of have the reality that it's pretty hard to hack it as a professional musician or an audio engineer without kind of having some serious support or laying out your own kind of funding in terms of maybe a big loan in order to get a recording studio, that kind of thing. That's kind of where I was, where I had a decision to make whether I was going to take the next step and rent a space and renovate and build a legitimate studio in which I could work out of. And I had a mentor at the time. I had a long conversation with him. My wife and I, always been talking about the future and what we wanted to do. And at the time, I had just finished an album, and we had just gotten it mastered. And I think it was like the day of or the day after the band released it and they had the release party, I started looking for jobs. Because the decision was, with the goals that we have, we can't get there with me doing this because it's going to take X amount of years, and here's what that looks like. So tree work came about. First of all, I always had a fascination with trees. I don't know what it was. It was just amazing to look at these giant living structures and how they work and how they stand up and how they persist for years and years. And a couple years before the decision to change, I went out west with my wife. It was our first time out there. And that's where we saw like the really big trees, like going to Vancouver Island and going to Cathedral Grove and looking at these trees that to me seemed like unimaginable structures. Like, how did they possibly get to this size and stay standing? The way I like to describe it is you're looking at this massive trunk, and atop of that trunk is like a townhouse complex on its side, and you're looking up at it, and it's like kind of swaying in the wind, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
And that was really where I was just like, I don't know what I want to do, but it has to be something with trees. I don't know what that looks like, but yeah, a couple years later, it was like March 2017 where I was like, this is a job. Like this, tree care, tree climbing, this is a job. And it's funny because over the winter, that's typically when hydro contracts are happening. And I had to stop one of my recording sessions because there was a line clearing crew outside of my house. Like they were up in the bucket and the chipper was running, and like we were trying to record vocals, and like, we got to stop. We can't do this right now. Like this too much noise outside. And I just sat there watching them. And it was actually the people that I went on to work with who were doing the work. And
That is cool.
I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So yeah, it kind of seemed like this idea just came to me where I didn't even really know it was a job, like climbing trees. And the timing of the start of the season, I was kind of like, they've probably already got the guys that they need. And like, I have no experience. Like, what am I going to do? At the time, I also worked at the beer store, which is a brewer's retail beer warehouse in Ontario. Not doing so well anymore. But one of the people that I knew through there who would come in from time to time, he worked for one of the big companies. And yeah, we got to talking and he got me an interview. And yeah, a couple weeks later, after an interview, I was told I got the job. And I was like really excited because I didn't think it was possible for me to get hired anywhere because I had zero experience.
Yeah.
And when I say zero experience, I mean like I had never held a chainsaw before. I'd never driven a pickup truck. I'd never worked outside before. I'd never worked at heights. I was afraid of heights, and I didn't have a license because I commuted by bike everywhere. So I had
Uh-huh.
my G1 at the time just
Right.
because I don't know, that's just what I had. But I had like less qualifications than anyone could possibly have. But I had,
This is an important point, though. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but you had less qualifications than anybody else had. And what's interesting is, I see posts on social media, how can I get into the industry? Um, I don't have any experience. I did work at a beer store, something like that. And people are always asking how to do it. And you literally just took the bull by the horns and went for it.
yeah, I mean, what I did, I guess, my boss at the time, he said to me like, "Well, you don't have any experience, but you seem like the right fit. Like you seem
Yeah, cool.
like you can do some stuff. Like we want to give you a shot." Because I showed how much that I was interested in it. And I showed the determination to kind of hit the ground running with it. Kind of because like in my mind at the time, how old was I? I would have been 26. I was kind of like, okay, this is a career transition. Like this
Sure.
has to work kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
So I kind of, poured my heart into it. But, legitimately, I was like, this is what I want to do. This is
Mm.
interesting. And it was confirmed in like my first week or two on the job where, started doing stuff. And very quickly, I was just like, okay, this is the thing. Yeah, an ADHD brain, which is what I have, is, you come across things where it's just like, okay, this is what I can focus on.
Mm.
And luckily for me, that's arboriculture, tree work, and everything about trees.
Amazing.
I can just hyper focus and just go really deep into, things that people would look at and be like, huh, like it's interesting that you're paying so much attention to that.
Mm.
Whereas to me, I'm just like, and like, you're not like, this is so amazing kind of thing. But it was tough at the start because I mean the heights thing. In my first week, I think it was like the Thursday or Friday of my first week, and they sent me out with one of the. I think they like to showcase like their kind of the workers that they have, so they sent
Yeah.
me out with one of the big tree guys who was doing some removals, and he was like way up these elms, and the job was like we're removing these elms, we're just bombing everything into the ravine, and he was like 60, 70 feet up these things, and I was looking up at him and I was just like, no way. Like, I can't do this. There's no way I can do that. But watching him and like just how calm and collected he was, and especially because on that job, it was just the two of us. And I knocked the chain off the chainsaw. And of course, having like never used a chainsaw before, I was just like, oh no. And he was kind of talking me through how to get the chain back on. And miraculously, I did it pretty quick. And the job went on. And that was my first, like, okay, I understand this
Mm.
kind of thing. And that's the other thing that really draws me to it is that there's so many things to figure out. There's so many things to just understand. And when you understand the mechanics of it, it kind of becomes like a motion that that you'll just never forget. And to this day, even though I don't really do tree work anymore, anytime I get up a tree for removal, it's like those motions will never leave me. It's pretty amazing. But
How did you get over that fear of heights? I got to ask that one because I love heights. So I'm just curious.
I never did. I just did things scared.
Okay,
That's
fair enough.
like, I mean, there was a lot of exposure therapy,
Yeah,
obviously, when like
yeah,
that's what you're doing. And I started climbing pretty quick. I think it was within 2 months I got a harness,
mm,
which was kind of a big deal at the time. The company I worked for, we had the biggest yard in Ontario, and lots of competition for gear and like who's moving up, and some guys start and then they get shuffled off onto stumping or onto the spray truck or something like that, and that you kind of see like, oh, they're cast to the side and like they're not on a tree crew kind of thing, even though those are very valuable positions like PHC and stumping, like those are very valuable, but people see tree crews as like the place to be. So just showing that like I wanted to do this part of it, that really, it kind of sped along my development. But I was kind of working with like, it was kind of a secret where I was like, okay, I'm afraid of this, but like, this is what I've chosen, and like, this is what I'm going to do. And like, my love for this is going to outmatch my fear. And yeah, it took a long time to like even be comfortable letting go of the tree and just hanging in a rope.
Yeah.
And I have a video. I took a lot of video when I was in the field. I got a GoPro very early on, and I have a video of myself up like the first like big tree that I ever climbed. And like, it was with my phone, and you can see just like shaking in my hands and just like really scared. And I look at that video now, I'm just like, oh, that was nothing.
Yeah.
Like, so,
Yeah.
things definitely changed since then. But I think past a certain point, everyone has the fear, but it's important. Like, it's really
Keeps you
important to
alive.
keep you in check,
Yeah.
because
100%.
exactly, because
Yeah.
it's not that you're frozen and you can't let go of the rope, or like, you can't move. It's, you're taking that second pass at, the knot you've tied for the rig,
Right.
or like your attachment points, or anything like that. It's the fear that keeps you in check. I don't know if fear is even the right word. It's the awareness of the situation
Yeah.
that keeps you
Yeah.
in check. And I'd say
Complacency.
that's what it was. So
Right.
I look back at some videos where I'm like, full stick in the bucket, removing a stone dead hickory beside hydro, and like watching myself make these cuts, like send some big tops right by the hydro, and then like just keep moving and keep moving. I'm like, it's amazing that I didn't like freeze up and stop and just
Yeah.
be like, whoa, what am I doing? And it's funny because I look at those videos now and I'm just like, it really is crazy what I used to do every day.
Yeah.
'Cause we
It's
don't realize.
I find, because it's not the same thing, but I climb and I teach climbing, and when I first started, I was following a guy for about 4 years. I was terrified. I almost quit. Every time I went out climbing, I almost quit. But I kept coming back, and you sort of never lose the fear, but like you said, you're in check of all of your systems, all of your equipment. You're double checking this stuff. You're making sure that you're tied on and everything else is tied on as well, so you don't drop it, etc., etc. And I think that you see people who don't have that sort of brain thing going on, and they're a little bit complacent, maybe.
Hmm.
And I think it's the keeping in check, making sure you're not getting complacent is the thing that keeps you alive in this situation. And again, I don't know tree work, but I imagine it's similar.
Yeah, I think with that, there's also a little bit of I don't know if lack of knowledge is a good term for it, but maybe, ignorance of certain situations where a more
Right.
experienced person would look at that and be like, here's what you got to watch out for. But, I've seen newer climbers who are very eager to get into a saddle and get into some stuff. And when you have the right person on the ground who's coaching you, that's the difference, where someone who has been in that exact situation many, many times can say, this will support you. You are safe to do this and this. But if you don't have that and you just start, climbing a tree because that's what the work order says, that's when you can get into some really dangerous situations. With the company I worked for, there was a lot of training surrounding certain wood decay fungi. So brittle cinder fungus is one that's very easy to miss, and it's among the most dangerous for climbers because it makes a perfectly healthy looking tree very unstable pretty quickly. So being able to have the education of like, here's what this looks like, here's what happens, as this progresses in a tree, here's what you need to watch out for. The training makes a big difference in how comfortable you are, but also the education in general.
Right.
I know so much more now about, the structure and function of trees and tree parts and how they've gotten to be as big as they are. And now I can climb a tree and just have no worries just because I'm educated. I know
Yeah.
exactly what's holding me. And obviously, there's many situations where that's not the case and you can't possibly predict. But in general, the more knowledge you have about what you're climbing, the easier it is to do so, because you can say with a reasonable amount of
Right.
confidence that, based on this species and how it grew, this will hold me, or this will hold the rig, or, whatever.
So getting the mentorship, getting into climbing, keeping that tenacity going, being keen on doing that, eventually doing it. It seems to me like you're a person that really knows where they want to go, and you're not just gonna to let go of it. And so that's where you were able to get into the climbing and do that kind of work. Now, what about education and how that helped you progress as well?
I mean, the ISA, the certified arborist, is the goal for kind of everyone who's starting out and working their way up. So that's a big thing, along with the DZ, because those are the kind of things that you have these two things. Now you can run a crew. Like, now you can be the one driving the truck, and that's kind of something that people strive for. So that motivation was good, but I'm also just like naturally curious. Like, I need to know the whys and the hows, and I was lucky because I recognized that. So as I started, doing more removals and just doing more work above ground, like I'm not just on the ground all the time. I'm taking the time to understand what I'm looking at, and I consider myself very lucky to have kind of recognized this, because if you're removing a tree that has a structural defect somewhere, I would purposely cut through the middle of it to get a cross section of it to see what's happening inside. So for an arborist in the field, maybe studying out of textbooks isn't really something that works, but the hands-on practical part of it that's in front of you every day, that's the most valuable part for learning, to me, as someone who is in the field and on their way up. Just being able to actually touch trees and spend time looking at things that nobody else really gets to see. Like, when you make that cut, when you make that final cut and the peg comes over, you're the first person in the world seeing inside what that looks like. And over time, you do that enough, and you build a massive reference library in your head of, this is what it looks like on the outside. I've cut through this. I've looked at it in cross section. This is what I can presume to be true about this based on what I see. And that, even on my desk, I have like lots of cross sections of,
Cool.
this is hackberry, and just like an included union of a tulip tree, like dissecting things and looking at them at different scales is really important, because trees scale. A small tree or a small tree part is the same as something that is 10 times the size. So using what's in front of you as a reference for everything that you're doing is very important. There's people that, you're an arborist, you're just doing the work orders. You're just, that's your job. You do the work, you go home, you don't think about it. That's one way to do it. But, recognizing, hey, this is an opportunity to learn. It's really important.
You're a very curious person, and not just, like I said, not just learning from textbooks, but also learning in the field, but being curious about what you're doing as well. That's interesting. So how about right now? What are you doing now? Because you mentioned you're not doing a lot of the production work now.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of consulting, which is basically using my knowledge to tell people about their trees. And in the case of development consulting, it's I help people get things built when there's trees around. So that's interesting. But I'm also exploring this video consultation platform, which is, there's been other people on the podcast, I think, that are also doing the same thing, which it's kind of like an underserved thing in the industry. And I think mostly because, people don't believe that you can actually diagnose issues with trees without being on site. But if you've worked in the field long enough, you have the necessary amount of reference material to be working with to understand, certain conditions and what kind of brought them on. And to me, that's what I love. I love the diagnostic part of it. And the cool thing about the transition from, being a production arborist into consulting, and it was what I hoped for from the beginning, was that it would allow me to look at trees in a completely different context. Because, when you're a climber, you're kind of like, when you look at a tree, you're kind of like, okay, there's the best tie-in point. If I was removing this, I would use that as the rigging point. I would redirect there, things like that. But now when I look at trees, I'm kind of like, look at the environment first. How did it get to where it is now? Because trees are an expression of their environment. And, this condition with this tree or this defect or whatever you want to call it, would this tree remain standing if this other tree wasn't there, or if this was in a different yard, or if it was facing in a different way? And I'm looking at trees a lot more in terms of where they are in their environment and how they got to where they are now and where they're going. And
Interesting.
it's an important thing if you're an arborist in the field. It's important to understand the decisions that you make and where they're going to lead to. And I was lucky because in the winter season I did a lot of line clearing, and I got to, when the cycles kind of reset, I got to go back and through a cycle that I had pruned 3 or 4 years before. So I got to go back and see the results of all of the cuts that I made and how they all turned out, which was really, really interesting. And that's a really valuable part of the
Very
job.
cool.
It's going back to what you've done to see what has happened.
I'm curious, what did you learn from that experience?
You learn that there's no certainty.
Okay.
Like, you can read about how things are going to react,
Yeah.
and even if you make perfect cuts, there's no guarantees. And sometimes you'll find that a limb has declined and died, or you'll find that instead of this cut that was meant to redirect this way, this other, lateral bud or lateral branch took off instead and it came this way. And yeah, it's super valuable information to have, to be able to go back and see.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it shows you that we're dealing with nature and biology, and all you can do is you do your best, and then you just keep doing your best, and you keep learning. And I'm guessing, and this is where I want to come on to a little bit more about your education, because you're a board certified master arborist as well. So you have the highest ISA credential there. It is just continual learning and continual improvement of your craft that just gets you from A to B to C to what you're doing now, I guess, and putting in the laps. So tell me a little bit about the kind of work you're doing. And not everybody becomes a consulting arborist. A lot, I would, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people stay working in the production side of things, or maybe move into the plant healthcare side of things, but don't quite go on the tangent you have.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have kind of 3 separate paths that on any one of those paths, people typically stick to one, where,
Right.
If you're a production arborist in the field, you're generally like, that's kind of where you stay unless you move into sales or move into management or anything like that. I'm also a journeyman utility arborist. So typically when you have that, you're a utility arborist, you're doing line clearing operations. That's what you do. And then, a consulting arborist with credentials and education, there's a lot of arborists that come from the field into consulting. And I think that's a prerequisite for anyone who's doing that kind of work, is you have to have time in the field with like, varied experience. But again, if you're a consultant, generally you didn't spend many years climbing, but if you did, like it's really important. I like to tell people right off the bat, as people say like, "Oh, you used to be in the field, and now you're consulting." I'm like, well, it's kind of easier on the body, which
Right.
people kind of
Right.
understand right away because production tree work is hard, like
Sure.
especially when you're kind of in circumstances where you're being relied on to be, doing the big removals and the big climbs and that kind of stuff every day. But it's not about the physical portion. There's a big mental portion as well, which if you're not working in the industry, it's really hard to understand.
Mm.
That it's not just the physical aspect that tires you out, it's the mental aspect. It's the volume of decision making, the high stakes decision making that you're doing every single day, that's really the draining part to me. Just being responsible for a commercial vehicle. I mean, driving a bucket truck and chipper through a city,
Mm.
there's a lot that can go wrong. And,
Hmm.
your day starts with a full inspection of that vehicle. And you have your crew for the day, and it's your responsibility to get the equipment and the crew to the job safely. And then you do your pre-job walk and you fill out your tailboard and you make your plan and then you execute. And all throughout the job, you're monitoring, you're making sure your guys on the ground are good, guys or girls, sorry. And you're making sure that you are doing the work well. You're making sure you're setting the proper pace. You're giving adequate breaks. You're making it as easy as possible for the people on the ground. You're relying on the skill set that basically just that part as second nature. And that's where I really found that I took off, is when the actual work part was muscle memory and second nature.
Mm.
And then I could start thinking about everything else,
Mm.
like the people on the ground and the pace and everything like that. And then, the job finishes, and you're responsible for the cleanup and the debrief with the client or the customer. And then when you're in this physically tired state, then getting the equipment and the crew back to the shop safely, and the debrief with, the salesperson or your manager, and maybe something went wrong. So there's something you have to deal with there. But then the next day you have to do it all again.
Right.
And you're kind of hoping for a unlimited streak of perfect days. And the reality is it's not what happens, especially with summer being the peak season. It's hard to take off enough time to really be fully rested and recharged. And I would take my vacation early on in the season, just kind of as everyone's booking off weeks there. I can't take that time off. I'll take my week off in May. So then from May until November or December, I was working straight through,
Yeah.
without another solid week off.
Yeah. Brutal.
Because at the time, I had 2 weeks vacation. So I'd have 1 week off and then save the other 5 days for, 3 days around Christmas so I can get that time off. And then doctor's appointment or whatever there. So it was hard to structure my life around that. And burnout was very real, and especially working for a company where you did work through the winter.
Mm-hmm.
And then winter came along, and that's where line clearing contracts would start. So you're kind of working with higher stakes in the wintertime when you should be recharging, and you're working in
In
sub-zero
terrible conditions.
temperatures,
Yeah. Yeah.
in FR gear with class 2 rubber gloves on. And that takes it out of you. It's as much of a mental game as it is physical.
Mm.
But again, people don't understand. People don't.
Thank you so much for going into so much depth, because generally, the general public, we want a guy to come in and do our tree work. What's the lowest price you can give me?
Mm-hmm.
But what you've just explained there is deep and huge.
Yeah, I mean, and that's on a good day. Like when you're having a good streak, everything's going well, it's fine. But if you, cause property damage, that's something that sticks with you. If you make a bad decision that, you kind of thought could go either way, but it turned out to go very much the other way and, maybe caused
Mm.
some bigger damage or, God forbid, someone got hurt. Those are the kind of things that stick with you.
Mm.
And now you're operating for the next several weeks with this in the back of your head, like, I can't slip up again. If I cause another bit of property damage, it's going to lead to, I'm going to get reprimanded. Maybe I'll get a suspension or something. But then, like, if you were to make a decision that causes someone to get hurt, that's an even bigger thing. And those are the things that really take it out of you. And there are times where you're just like, I can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
Because you start to stop trusting the autonomy that's built into your body and like how you do the work. And without a proper break, it's tough to get that back. And I went through that. I usually, if I took a vacation in May, it was usually by October where I was just like, I'm losing it. Like I'm starting to make some bad decisions. I need to check myself, which is important. And it was good working in a shop with so many other people. I think, at its peak, we usually had 35 or 40 people on at a time. So we did act as like a big support group for each other, where if someone had an incident, there'd be, guys at their side talking them through, like, you couldn't have done anything differently, or, maybe, yes, that was a bad decision, but let's look at why it happened. So the support aspect is huge when you're working with people that also understand. Because it's not like I could go home and, talk to my wife about, I was trying to send a top this way and I blew through a bit of the hinge on, the far side and it caused it to go this way. And, she just looks at me like, okay. I'm just like, don't you understand? It made the top go this way. So it's hard for people to understand. But in terms of like a transition to something else, like transitioning to consulting to me it was a combination of it's easier on the body, but also at the time it was when my wife told me she was pregnant with our third child. So, she told me, and like, I'll never forget this, where, we were like elated. It was amazing. But like one of the first things I said after that was like, it's time for me to get out. Like maybe it's time to go to the city, or, maybe it's time to think about transitioning, because working in the field with one kid, like that's doable. Two kids to me is kind of a stretch, like, when they're really young. But the third was like, okay, we got to make a plan, especially like later on. I had kind of a serious injury, and that opened my eyes to like, okay, like I'm actually playing a numbers game here. I could keep doing this. The injury I had was pretty traumatic to me. And when you look at what you do every day, because it becomes very normal. Like I said, looking back at some of these GoPro videos, I'm just like, I can't believe what I was doing every day. But at the time, it was just like, that was Tuesday. That was just like, yeah, just another day of the week. But you're very much playing a numbers game. And you can be as safe as you possibly can, but sometimes that's just not what the tree has in mind. And yeah, that was a big part of it. Was I'm not just thinking about myself. I'm thinking about my family and like my future and what it means for me. If I were to keep doing this, what else is going to happen? And it's hard to get out of that mindset once you've suffered an injury that, is serious enough. You're kind of like, oh, it can happen to me. And when's it going to happen again? And how much worse could it be? Kind of thing. And yeah, I was at the point where it stopped kind of being fun and exciting. It was more like a routine. I found myself like just trying to get through certain things. I was losing the zest for it, but not because I was like, oh, trees, I hate trees. It was more like I'm removing another mature tree because this person doesn't like raking up the leaves.
Right.
And a sentiment was like, if I wasn't working for this company, like I'm doing a lot of things that I would never choose to do otherwise.
Mm.
And I think that was a turning point for me, was like, if I wasn't being told to do this, then I wouldn't do it.
Right.
So that was the motivation to change. And that's not a universal, it's not a universal experience. I mean, there are a lot of companies that, have arborists that have many, many years under their belts because
Sure.
they're given work that they enjoy for clients that they
Sure.
really like. And, but when you work for a big company, it's just, here's the work order, go do it. And it's hard to break out of that once you're so far along, especially if there's other people at the shop who've been there much longer than you, who are pretty obviously over it as well. So I kind of saw my opportunity. An opportunity came up. I saw the chance to get out. It was the right time. And it was also, and I talked to a lot of the other guys about this, but it's like, you need to have a plan because your body's not going to let you do this forever.
Yeah.
And I was someone who was very like, I used a friction saver for every climb, a foot ascender. I had one of those, the Stihl GTA 26, the like handheld little handsaw thing. It was battery powered, so I wasn't like reefing on a handsaw. I was very mindful of, the strain I was putting on my body. But even still, like I was understanding where this was going to lead if I didn't have a plan to stop doing it. And yeah, when the opportunity came up, it's like, okay, this is the chance I have. Now, with that in mind, I definitely left the field more or less like in my prime. I was very much like at the top of my game. So it was a very hard decision. And to this
I was
day,
gonna say, yeah. How do
to
you?
this day, yeah,
Yeah.
it remains like, I look back and I'm like, I'm going to go back. Like
Right.
in some way, shape, or form, I'm going to go back to tree work. I feel like this is like consulting. It's not a temporary thing, but I'm going to adapt more to a hybrid approach of, tree care and consulting. I mean, that has its challenges, but I'm not finished with the field, but I
So
saw my chance.
how did you? Because I can tell by the way you're talking, I can tell by the passion you have for the work that you did. I mean, sure, we all do a job for a certain amount of time. We get tired, absolutely, especially the work you do, the mental aspect, the physical aspect. It must be a huge strain, absolutely. And then third child is coming along. How on earth do you leave and start a business?
Well, it didn't happen immediately.
Okay.
So, yeah, our third child was born, and it's funny. It was like, I think the day before his due date was my last day in the field, and I think that's how it happened with each one of our kids. Was like there was a transition at each one, in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, my last day in the field, he was born. I took 2 weeks off and then started with the consulting division of my company, and I did that for a year, and then after a year, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this myself. And it was another year after that
Right.
that I actually, went ahead and left my job and went independent. So I spent a full year preparing for it, and that's kind of, I think that was the right approach for me, because as I said, I didn't know how to run a business. I like back when I was, recording bands and doing live sound. That was like a freelance business kind of thing, but it was very, very much less formal, I guess. But in the grand scheme of like a professional consulting practice, I didn't know how to run a business. I didn't know what I needed to keep track of and anything like that. So I also I didn't have the BCMA at the time, so I knew that there was some prerequisites to going independent. I didn't just get frustrated and say
Right.
that's it, I quit and I'm just going to do this myself.
Right.
It was a very calculated move. I mean, because it had to be with 3 kids, a wife, a mortgage. Like the decision had to be something that I was sure of, and yeah, it was a long time of preparation. Yeah, the last year was insane because I was giving myself a business education. I was building the bones of what is now my consulting practice. I was studying for the BCMA exam. I was working full time,
Mm.
and had the 3 kids, and like one of them was a baby at the time, and they're all 2.5 years apart, so they all kind of hit their developmental milestones at the same time. So there's stretches that are like crazy. I was waking up like 5:30 or 6 in the morning just because like that's when the kids would get up, and I would do everything I need to do throughout the day. My wife would go to bed at 9:30 or 10 o'clock, and I would be up until midnight, just doing all of the other aspects of what I needed to get done, whether that's studying, whether that's agonizing over this logo design or
Yep.
this part of the website or whatever, and then yeah, I'd go to bed and get up and do it again. And yeah, I think, and I tell people like everything that I accomplished in the year before independence, like most people like pick one of those things and that would be an intense year.
Mhm.
So it took a lot of preparation, and it wasn't a decision I made lightly, but it was something that I'm glad I did all the work
Yeah.
because when I launched, I already had the knowledge in place. I already knew, how my intake worked. I knew how to route things, how to deal with inquiries, that kind of thing, and how to execute the actual work part of it, how to follow up, how to enter this stuff into QuickBooks, how to look professional, I guess. Uh, yeah, it's a lot, but uh, it was worth it. And I'm glad that I was able to, I don't know if inspire is the right word, but there was a couple other people that did the same thing. And we had a lot of long conversations about kind of how to do it, where it leads to,
Mm.
and it led them to make the same decision and go independent, which I'm happy for because when you are on the other side, you kind of realize like, what was I so afraid of? I mean,
Yep.
granted, I did a lot of work to prepare for it, but
Yep.
like, I knew that was going to be the case where, like, I would make the leap,
Mm.
and then pretty quickly I'd be like, oh, okay, this is what it's all about. Like, obviously, the main hesitation is the fear of like,
Mm.
whoa, what if I don't get any clients, or like, well, what if this, and this, and yeah, that's a concern that I had, but I realized I've already had that feeling. I just didn't connect the dots. It's
Mm.
exactly how I felt before our first child was born,
Mm.
where I was like, well, what if I'm not a good dad? What if I can't figure out how to change a diaper? Sleep deprived. Like, I really like to sleep. Like, I'm going to be operating on like 3 hours of sleep.
Mm.
But then, like, you're in the delivery room, they're born, you hold them for the first time, and all those worries just wash away and they turn into action points. And it's the same thing with with going independent. With like, you have all these worries and these concerns, but then when you're in it, you're just like, okay, here's what I need to do.
Mm. Well,
Which
I like that you took a very pragmatic approach to actually getting to the point where you can execute because I've met people that literally, and probably I'm guilty of that as well. Quit their job straight away. Now I'm going to do this, and it all goes terribly wrong because there wasn't any preparation. So I think at least doing some preparation ahead of time is important for success, and particularly
Mhm.
I'm assuming as a consulting arborist as well, you probably you work within a network as well,
Hmm.
and trying to figure out, how to get that continual stream of work through people I suppose,
Yeah.
as opposed to suddenly the internet works for you.
Well, it was actually a huge part. I'm glad you brought it up because I have a professional circle of people that we have a group chat. We talk
Yeah,
every day,
yeah,
and that was integral, or
right.
whatever the word is. It was the most important thing to have other people, other BCMAs, when I was just a certified arborist, who were showing me the way.
Mm,
And our group chat acted as an open forum where I was allowed to contribute and give my input on things without the threat of feeling like someone that didn't know what they were talking about, or
mm,
it gave me the confidence to know that I was able to do this, and also being shown by people who were doing this, here's what it looks like on the other side. I think that was probably the biggest factor in the
mm,
transition I made, was that it all started with meeting one person who was a BCMA in Toronto, and we started talking, and we found that we clicked, and then we brought in someone else into when we formed a group chat. So now there's two BCMAs and me, and then we brought in another. So there's three of them and me, and that to me was like motivation enough. Like, I got to get on these guys' level.
yeah.
It's, as the saying goes, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And that's kind of where I found myself, working in the consulting division of the company I was in. It was kind of like, there's nowhere else to go from here. But now I found this other room where all
Mm,
of a sudden I'm like, the least experienced, the least credentialed, and there's so much to learn from these people. And ultimately, that's like the push that kept me going. Is
yeah,
talking about the exam and supplying me with the different study materials and stuff like that. The network is very important, not just for maybe getting work or getting referrals, but it's easy to stagnate as an independent if you don't have a professional circle,
mm,
because you can very much feel like you're just on a boat in the middle of the ocean by yourself, where you're kind of casting messages off to the nether and nothing's coming back. But if you have
mm,
another person who's like, oh no, it's just the midsummer lull, like yeah, I'm not getting anything either. That's where you're kind of like,
right.
okay, that makes me feel better. And
That's
yeah,
cool.
we all need connections like that.
I think it's true of any industry, especially if you go out and do something on your own, that you do have a network. And even with what we do, we have a network of other companies that do exactly the same thing as us, and we're friends, and we grow together. We help each other, even though,
Mhm,
quotes, we're competitors. And it's the
mhm,
best. It was the most surprising thing for me that happened, but
mhm.
it's also a blessing. You all bring different things to the table and succeed together, which
Yeah,
is
and
huge.
that's an
Yeah,
important thing to look at is,
yeah,
yes, on paper we are all competitors,
yeah.
but also we're all different people and we all offer different things. And like,
Exactly. Yeah.
I can be transparent about what I do, and like I can send you a copy of my report. You can copy it word for word, but like, you're not me and I'm
Exactly.
not you.
Mm.
Like, we all offer something different and we all have our strengths. And it's important in that kind of circle, because someone could call me up and say, "Hey, my neighbor hacked my tree to death and I want an appraisal." Instead of saying like, "Okay, I can take that on for you," you can say, "Here's who you should really talk to. Like, it's
Right.
not my specialty, but here's who you should talk to." And then, just loop him in and say, here's the person you want to talk to for an appraisal. Very highly skilled. I'll let you guys take it from here. So being able to refer people where your expertise isn't
Yeah.
necessarily there and someone else is a better fit, like, that's a really big value in a professional circle, because
Yeah.
then it comes back to you in other ways
It,
where
it does. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
might say, "I'm not sure about this diagnosis, but but this person is really really up to speed with what's going on in Ontario right now, which, yeah, it's huge.
Very cool. So we're running out of time here, which I'm really gutted about because I'm so enjoying this conversation. So I would really love to have you on a podcast again, and we can continue this or go deeper. But in the meantime, we've already mentioned E-Myth Revisited. Any other books that you would recommend for people that were interested in starting their own business or even learning about trees?
The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wobelin, I think is his name. He's a German forester. He's responsible for a forest in a small village in Germany somewhere. But
Oh, cool.
reading about him talking about his experience managing a forest. Am I still here?
You're still here.
Okay. Listening to him talk about managing a forest over 30 years
Yeah.
and really taking in what he has observed over that length of time, it's really valuable because it's something that I tell everybody, and it's something that kind of reframes kind of everything that I talk about with people when it comes to trees, is that trees operate on different timescales than humans do, right? And it's a big way for people to kind of understand that, like, okay, so what you're saying is this might not be a problem we might not notice this for another few years, or like, yes, you can replace this driveway now, but here's what's going to happen to this tree in 3 to 5 years. And, in 10 years, here's what's going to be the likely outcome, kind of thing. And, that book it brings a lot to open your eyes about how trees actually communicate with each other and act as a group, and how standalone trees in an urban environment might be stressed just because they're alone, because trees are meant to stand in groups and communicate in groups and support each other. So something like that is really important. It kind of humanizes trees in a way that other books don't, which is interesting because, like, now that I've gotten so far into, like, how trees are as, like, on a cellular level, like I bought a microscope and I do a lot of microscope work, and you can almost feel the pain of cutting into a tree because, like, you understand, like, if I look at this under a microscope, you can see, like, the jagged edges and, like, the kind of ripping and tearing of cell walls and stuff that happens with any kind of injury. Yeah, it's really interesting. In terms of, like, a business book, there's another book. I forget the name of it now. It's something about it's a book that basically talks about MBA programs, and it gives you the short version of an MBA program in terms of running a business. And that's where I learned, mainly that's where the concept of an opportunity cost came for me, where if I had an inquiry, I'd look at it and maybe I'd say, okay, this is pretty far away. The scope is pretty complex. What's the opportunity cost on this?
Right.
This is probably going to tie me up pretty good for, like, the next couple of weeks. Maybe this isn't the best choice to take this on because I can tell this is going to be a headache or it's going to be a long, drawn out thing. The opportunity cost is very high. So just having an understanding of concepts like that in terms of business is important.
Yeah.
It's not just about, like, running the numbers.
Yeah.
It's about knowing your numbers
Right.
and knowing the implications of taking on certain things and what they could turn into that, really could derail you, kind of thing.
I'm going to follow up with you after the interview and see if we can get a name of that book and put it on the show notes. If we
Sure.
if we could dig it up, that would be fantastic. Cool.
It's by Josh Kaufman.
Okay.
I can't believe The Personal MBA, Josh Kaufman.
All right. Perfect. There you go. Thank goodness for the internet.
I can't believe I forgot that.
So where can people find you, Brent, if they wanted to get in contact with you?
So I operate under Brent Hocking Consulting Arborist, which is bhconsultingarb.ca. And I also operate my video consultancy platform, and that's at treetruth.ca. So
Perfect.
either one of those.
Okay, and I guess we can find you on LinkedIn social as well.
That's right.
So if
Only
anybody wants to
LinkedIn. I
reach
don't.
out,
I don't really. I've
LinkedIn.
recently started using Instagram for Tree Truth, which is actually pretty cool because it kind of
Mm,
gives me a place for
sure.
all of my like obsessions to come out and like all of the years of pictures and videos that I have. But also it makes me like obsessively check it to see the engagement, and that's the part of social media I don't
It
like.
works.
Yeah, exactly. And
Love it.
yeah, I tend to try to stay away from that, but also,
Great.
having to keep up with that kind of stuff because that's just
Yeah.
the time we're in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Brent, thanks so much for joining me today. Absolutely, would love to have you on again in the near future as well and carry on the
All right,
conversation.
yeah. Part two. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Take care.
Thanks.